Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Specifying Practice Group webinar. Our topic for today is a two-parter. Part 1, specs must state the architect's intent, and Part 2, survey results for acceptable product submittals. Our thought leader today is David Gutzman. Dave is a registered architect, certified construction specifier, and founding principal of Conspectus, a specifications and quality assurance consulting firm. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. Your participation during today's webinar is encouraged, and we've allowed time to take questions throughout the presentation. Although attendee audio lines are muted, you may click the raised hand button to indicate that you have a question or comment. We will identify you by name and unmute your line, at which point you may begin speaking. If you are participating via streaming audio and do not have a computer microphone, you may also type your question into the chat box. And now, Dave, over to you.
Well, very much, Rob, and welcome everybody to this month's practice group meeting. Glad you could join us. And I'm coming to you actually remotely today, I guess. I'm at the Independence Seaport Museum in Philadelphia, actually attending a very nice seminar that Hilti had put on for the healthcare industry. It was an all-day session, so I drugged my computer along with me, and now I'm coming to you live from the museum. So the today is I'm trying to maybe incite some reaction from our group. This is a program or a comment that I am making to my current staff about how we want to be able to approach specifications with our own clients. And I want you to take a look at the comment that's just below the session heading. This is something that I pulled off of a LinkedIn discussion off of the CSI LinkedIn group, and it was one that was started maybe a couple of days ago, and the actual tone of the comments was starting out that they don't understand how an architect can actually specify intent and expect a contractor to be able to understand what the intent is and be able to price that. But my take on this is that I really believe that architects actually have a duty to specify their intent. And I think if they don't, then we end up with a condition where how does a contractor know what to build if he doesn't specify the intent? Now, the intent, as I take it, is not some vague thing where the architect might say, here's what I'm telling you need for the project, here are the model numbers, the products, but if that's not what you believe, or if that's not what is determined to be needed, then Mr. Contractor, it's up to you to understand what's in my head and be able to furnish what exactly is required for the project. That's not what I'm saying when I'm saying the specifications must state the architect's intent. What I'm trying to do is say that we capture that intent, whatever is in the architect's head, and that has to become part of the specifications so that when the contractor is reading them, that he will have a very clear picture as to what the architect really did mean to have happen for their particular project. So back to the premise. The specs must state the architect's intent. And if we go to the kinds of things that we're putting into the specification, we're specifying the basic materials, basic products, assemblies where all of those things go together, but we're trying to put this all into a project manual based on master format. Master format tells us from the introduction to the document that the master format is arranged to be able to specify work results. Not necessarily products, not materials, not assemblies, but work results. To me, that's very similar to what we would be saying in trying to specify the architect's intent. So with master format, here's what master format is saying work results are. That it's really anything that you're going to add to as part of the construction process that results in some form of physical construction that's going to be, whether it's an alteration, whether it's a maintenance, even demolition, it's some sort of physical representation of what's described in the document. What I'm looking at is some of the more common definitions then of intent and how we can apply this to the specifications. So here's one abbreviation, that it's an anticipated outcome that can guide, and in this case, the contractor's planned actions. So if the architect can explain what is actually required sufficiently to be able to guide the contractor's actions, the contractor ought to be able to deliver what the architect does intend. What I'd like to share with you is a couple examples of what I see in specifications that are used in the section includes statements at the beginning of the section. And these examples are coming right out of, and I don't mean to pick on them, but this comes right out of master spec. So if you open up section 042000, I still can't figure out how to say the 6-digit numbers. And it's a basic masonry section. You open it up. The section has a list, and this is only a sampling. There are probably about 25 different items in that spec section. So it lists CMU, it lists face brick, it lists ties. It gives you a picture of materials or of products, and it doesn't really tell you anything about how these products are used. It doesn't give you a clue to the architect's intent as to why the section is even part of the specification or part of the project manual. You go into Division 10, into toilet accessories, and the only thing that's there is it splits it out as to whether it's a public use or private use, but public use washroom accessories. Gives you no clue as to what kinds of accessories you might expect to find in the section, and no clue other than that they happen to be located in a public use toilet room. So there's no real good roadmap to this section from the very opening statement of the section to know what to expect and what the architect's intent for these specs may be. So back to the premise again, and what I want to do now is sort of walk through with what I am suggesting may be a better way to be able to capture that architect's intent. So specifiers, and realize I'm an independent specification consultant, and that puts me in maybe a different position than some of you that are listening today. If you're working in-house in a firm, it's easy for you to walk around the corner, go kick somebody in the shins, get their attention, and maybe drag some information out of them. For me, it's a little bit more difficult, and I have to rely on telephone, email, and all kinds of different devices that we're using to be able to capture the architect's attention long enough to be able to get information out of them. But what I'm suggesting here is that we need to take the drawings that we receive, and as we go through and start developing our own checklists for being able to write the specifications, because this is all a process, that as we're developing these checklists and our notes that we're carrying forward into the specification, we're already capturing the architect's intent. And it may be a back and forth discussion with the architect to be able to clarify that intent, because as we're making our notations, it's going to raise other questions about how the architect is intending to use a product, where he's intending to install it, because maybe we see a note on a drawing about a particular product, whatever it may be, but we can't find it anywhere on the details or elevations or wherever it may appear. So it raises the question back to the architect, okay, I see, but where did you intend for this product to be used? We in turn take all of these inferred requirements, the architect's intent, and turn them into a very specific statement that becomes a contract requirement, because that's what the contractor has to depend upon. He has to have a very firm, concrete thing that he can grasp as to what is going to be required of him to be able to meet the contract. Now, I like this next definition of the architect's intent that you see here, and it reminds me of what I sometimes tell clients, our clients, that I'm there to pick their brain. I'm trying to get as much information as I can, so I'm trying to interpret whatever his state of mind was when he made the decision to put something on a drawing. So I've found myself reading two different books recently, and one is Architectural Specifications, title of the book, and for the life of me now I'm not going to remember the author's name, but the book was actually written in 1940, and reading through the book today and knowing what is in or was in the PRM and is now in the current practice guides, many of the concepts that were promoted in 1940 are exactly the same concepts that we're trying to deal with today. They've harped it all. The other book that I'm reading that's actually influencing some of this opinion is a book called Made to Stick. And it's a book about how you can not develop ideas, but present ideas that people will actually remember. And so I think putting all of these things together, the exposure that I've had, especially with these two books, and they were coming at the same time, so it sort of fell into place, that we want to be able to treat the specifications similarly to this Made to Stick book. We want to be able to create this idea that people can comprehend and understand then through this comprehension what the architects really, what they really intend to produce with a particular building. So what I'm saying is through that we want to draw on individuals' experience. If we can paint this mental picture by using a section includes statement, if we can accurately describe in a sentence, and I'm not talking about an extremely long sentence, a concise, simple statement that would allow people to grasp an idea, draw on their experience, and know instantly then what was expected and what they should be able to find in the specification. I think that if we can do that, that the contractors are going to understand, and we're going to have far fewer questions coming back from the contractor. It's going to take a little bit more effort on the specifiers and the architect's part, but I think long term that this is something that's going to improve the entire process. I found myself thinking about the specifications a little bit differently. And Josh, I think we have the first poll question. Do you have that ready?
I sure do. You want me to go ahead and launch?
Yes, would you please? And you have to pardon me because, again, I told Josh earlier, I'm a little bit hampered today because I don't have my dual monitors since I'm working off of a laptop. So trying to keep track of what's going on is a little bit more difficult. Okay. Wow, I like these results because it's going to give me something to talk about. Okay, so we have 23% saying the best specs are produced during DD phase, and 36 coming in second when the drawings are complete, 41% during DD. Okay. When we find ourselves being called to produce specifications earlier and earlier in a project, actually most of our projects now, our clients are wanting a first draft construction spec during DD. They're skipping outline altogether. The first step is to create the first draft of the construction spec. I'd like you to think about something that if you go back the 40 years to when this architectural specifications book was written, the drawings were done when the specifications were started. I mean, you think about, I think Lewis has said a couple of times where he remembers when he started in the industry, the drawings were finished, they were carted to the back of the room in the little cramped office with the spec writer, and 2 weeks later out came the spec. My contention is that the very best specifications are probably written when the drawings are done, because that way we can capture much more accurately what that intent is, and we can start to look at things that are probably minimal in scope and be able to find those things and actually flag them for the contractor so he knows what all the parts and pieces are without having to try to search the drawings to find them. So even though I think the majority in practical sense today, the best specifications have to be written during the CD phase because there just certainly isn't time to wait for the drawings to be completed. But I think that ultimately if we had that luxury of time, that we'd find ourselves in a better position to produce the most accurate specs once all of the drawings were completed. Okay, Josh, I think we can do the second poll question.
Absolutely. It's Rob.
You with me, Josh?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
You hear me?
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why I got off onto Josh. Pardon me.
That's all right. Here we go.
This is going almost as I thought it might. Almost. Okay. I think that's a good representation. We've got certainly 91% of you out there think that specs are being written for the contractor. Yes, I agree. I'm surprised at the number, the 42% for the owner, because I would suggest that the people that we're actually writing these specifications for is not the owner. We're actually writing them to be able to get the building built. And if you think about the design process where architects, engineers, and everybody else on the design team is going to be working on projects for months, sometimes for years, and the contractor has only weeks, maybe a month, to put together a construction estimate. My belief is that the number one person that we're writing these specifications for is the contractor's estimator. If we can't make drawings and specifications perfectly clear for that estimator to be able to comprehend in the precious little time that he has, the estimate is going to be wrong, and we may not have a project. Because if we're over budget, the owner may just throw their hands up or we may find ourselves in a VE process and end up with a project that we really didn't anticipate because now we've taken everything out. And it could be simply because the estimator didn't have time enough or didn't have documents that suited him well enough to be able to understand what was really required for the project. I would say the next most important person is going to be the contractor superintendent, because he's the one that's going to have to build this and inherit all of the documents. And finally, I would say the AE's contract administrator, because the design team, while they may be on the project site occasionally, they're probably going to delegate that responsibility to someone with specific contract administration experience, so that, again, this contract administrator has probably not been involved in design as it progressed through the AE shop, and now coming in probably around the start of bidding or at contract negotiation, has to be able to get on board quickly and be able to understand the documents that he's inherited. Rob, I'm going to take a short breath here and let anybody, did we end up with any questions yet, or anybody who has any comments?
Yes, we do actually. We have a couple comments and a question here. I'll start with the question from Robert Bowman. He's asked, how do you feel about writing specs during the CD phase and having the opportunity to be a part of the decision-making process?
During the CD phases, I think being part of the decision-making process is something that we always want to be, because I find myself trying to offer technical advice to the design team their way through the spec writing process. From our standpoint, for efficiency in writing the specs, the more information that we can have on the drawings when we start our work, it's actually better for us because we can get the specifications much more accurate the first pass through. And I understand that if we can be involved earlier in the process, we may be able to help influence some of those decisions. But I'm also, in my own practice, trying to guide that decision-making by writing a table of contents which includes some basic information about what should be included in the spec for each of the sections, plus some of the terminology that we would expect to be using in the spec as we develop the construction specifications. I hope that answers the question for you. If not, chime in again and I'll try again. Anything else, John?
Yep, we did have a couple comments. One is from John, and I apologize if I mess up your last name. I believe it's John Schlageter. But his comment is, you can capture intent when the drawings are done, but if you don't start specs until then, you can't influence the outcome.
Absolutely true. That's, yeah, if you're not part of the process, you're right, you certainly can't influence, you're only reacting. Yes, I agree.
And another comment from Kevin O. He stated, the contract documents are written for all project stakeholders, including owner, sub, suppliers, contractor, AE, and more. Which is kind of true.
Yes, it is true. But what I'm trying to get to is who is the one that is really the primary or the principal person that's using the specifications. And I really strongly believe that we should be, with everything that we're writing in the specifications, we ought to be considering the contractor's estimator.
And also, we have a hand raised from Thomas Smith. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now, Thomas. If you want to speak up, you should be unmuted now.
Dave, can you hear me?
I can. Hello, Tommy.
Hello, David. Where's Lewis?
He said he was on a job site. I'm sorry, so I don't have my comic relief.
Okay, I can tell. Quick question. In the, I think it's 87 or 97 AIA generations, they changed from using the term intended results to indicated results. Would you care to comment on that change?
Oh, you caught me by surprise, Tommy. I didn't realize there was that subtle difference. I think that under contracts, you absolutely have to have something, reading intent, and putting it in that kind of a term, I think makes it very difficult for the contractor to produce what is going to be required. I think it has to be a very specific statement as to what is required. So intent and indicated, I would certainly favor the term indicated.
Because that's what's replaced intended results. So it's kind of, and I think that was done because of liability issues, quite honestly, because I think the contractors were not trying to, they were tired of trying to guess the architect's intent. So.
Right, right. And that was the crux of the discussion on the LinkedIn group, that they felt that the architects were actually trying to avoid some of the responsibility for tying down the actual requirements by trying to specify it as an intent. Okay. Anything else then, Rob?
Yeah, I do see a couple other questions, it looks like. First from Doug Freeman. He's asking, what is your opinion on who's best suited to write the specification? Should it be the project architect or an independent spec writer that specializes in spec writing, and why?
Oh, now you've got me trying to pick sides. Okay. I don't know that one is suited more than the other, and I don't mean this to be wishy-washy. I've been in the situation both writing specifications in-house and as a consultant. So if it's a project architect, my only concern about having project architects writing the specifications is often they are done near the end of the project, and they're also trying to juggle all of the other project requirements at the same time, and I think that that's a very difficult mix to maintain and be able to do justice to both. So I would certainly vote in favor of having someone dedicated to writing specifications, whether it's someone in-house or whether it's a consultant, because I think it deserves that kind of attention as opposed to trying to divide project architect's attention into two different arenas.
All right, and we have a couple more here. The next is from Keith Pardo. He's stating, when I teach how to do door hardware specifications, I teach the students to think of their specifications as the owner's written instructions to the contractor. If they keep this perspective in mind, they are less likely to include statements that assign responsibility to specific parties. For example, the contractor shall, what have you.
Right. Yeah, and that's a good perspective. I think that indeed the specifications are instructions to the contractor, and if we do keep that in mind, I think it will improve it. And I want to, I've gotten backwards here, but I want to go on to the next piece of this, and maybe that'll help explain my position a little bit more, and see if we have any other comments on this, because if we take this to the full hour today, that's fine with me. We can share the survey results at a future date. I didn't expect this one to take more than half of today's time, but I'm glad to hear all of the questions and comments. I think that's great. So my position is that specifications, and I'll say this as it relates especially to the section includes statements, that they should state in a consistent order three things. Okay, what products will be installed? And these would all be in a single sentence. How the products will be installed. And where the products will be installed. Now, and I'm not saying with where, specific locations in a project, unless it's something that is such a minute thing that if we don't state it very specifically, the contractor is likely to miss it. So I'll go back to these section includes examples, and here are two that I'd like to put out to you. That if we took the Division 4 masonry section and instead of listing CMU, face brick, veneer ties, flashings as products in the section includes, if we painted the mental picture for the contractor's estimator that says this section includes face brick veneer with CMU backup at exterior cavity walls, he can instantly draw on his own experience to know exactly what that cavity wall is. He now has that picture before he even reads the rest of the specification to know what he should find in that spec. Being that it's an exterior wall, he should find flashings. He should find weeps. He probably is going to find something about insulation. He's going to find the veneer ties because he knows how the brick is being used. He knows where the brick is being used. We don't have to reference specific drawing details. We don't have to get to that level to describe every piece that goes into this assembly, but we've painted that mental picture. The same thing with the toilet accessories. So we can say it contains framed wall mirrors, surface mounted at public toilet room lavatories. So now he already has the mental picture. There's the wet wall in the toilet room. We've got the lavatory line, a mirror in front of every lab. He now has the concept and he knows what to look for on the drawings. And now he knows where to go to count the mirrors. So I think that if we can approach this section includes statement in this fashion to specify what products, how they're installed, and where they're installed, we are going to do the contractor a very good service. We're going to guide him to be able to help to produce an excellent estimate, an accurate estimate, and we're going to end up providing some help for our CA personnel, because something else that happened to me recently that sort of brought this whole picture home again. We were asked to participate in a project that is a casino resort project. It was a project that was started in 2006. It was taken to what the architect tells us is about 70% completion and put on hold in late 2007. So now the project is back and active again. Most of the team that was involved in the project is gone. They handed us the specifications and asked us to review the spec to see how complete the spec was and what might need to be done to complete it. Now, NOAA is probably about somewhere between a $3 and $4 billion project. The number of drawings for this project is just massive. And to ask us to go through all of the drawings to be able to understand the project at this point, because they needed a very quick opinion about the status of the spec. Spending that kind of time on the drawings at this point was out of the question. So they just handed us the spec and said, just give us your opinion based only on the spec. Well, when I open the spec, I have, in a case of, say, masonry, in this particular instance, I saw CMU only. I saw no flashings. I saw no veneer ties. I saw no weeps. I saw nothing that indicated that this CMU was going to be used anywhere on the exterior of the building. So it begins to have me ask questions now, is this CMU only on the interior? Well, if I read through the rest of the spec, I all of a sudden start finding references to the CMU being backup for other materials for the exterior wall cladding. But to read the CMU spec, there was no clue. So the contractor picking this thing up, would he have a good idea going through this specification simply from the spec? No. He wouldn't have been able to do it. But what I took back to the architect is that some of these things, even to be able to help the contractor at this point because the project is so massive, some of these kinds of statements about what, how, and where would really be a great help to them. And I think, and the reaction I got was pretty positive, so I'm thinking that this is how we're going to go back now and try to finish this spec. So we're back again to the front, and I'm saying, I still say, and I would promote to my own staff, that we must try to state the architect's intent. And I want to do this in very short, concise statements in the section includes. So Rob, do we have any more questions and comments?
We do. I'll say the first question is from Robert Bauman, I believe, again. And he's asking, how do you feel about the potential for conflict when revisions affect the accuracy of your section include states and you either don't revise or are not actively involved?
That could be a hazard. I agree. I would hope, at least from our own experience with the clients that we have, we are generally involved in the revision process, even when it goes into the CA phase, that they are actively talking to us about revisions that are going to be required for the specifications. And what I am working with one client where we're actually using the concepts that I'm presenting, because they also have their own internal QA process that the QA reviewers that they use on each project are people that are not involved in the design. So it's call it an independent in-house peer review. So when they open up the specifications, when they're written with these section include statements, it also gives them a very good grip on what is supposed to be included in the project. This same firm also writes a, they call it a basis of design. It's very much arranged like the CSI promoted preliminary project description. And it also gives them a good clue looking at their basis of design and the specification statements that the project team actually captured all of the scope. I understand the concern if the design team does modify or revision, that if we don't keep those statements current, it could certainly be misleading.
And let's see here. Next is a comment from Greta Eckhart. She suggests the key to design intent is to identify function along with what, how, and where. Asking the architect to explain what is the function of the product or work result can enhance their decision-making process as well as give information for communicating with the contractor.
Wow. I think I understand the concept, and I think what you're also saying is something similar if you're doing basis of design or if you're doing preliminary project description, that hopefully we are capturing some of that function. I understand the idea. I think that I hadn't thought of including function as one of the elements that I'd like to try to specify. I find in trying to go through this that it's actually a bit of a struggle even to come up with the what, how, and where in a very succinct, understandable sentence. And I don't know. I would have to try adding function to see if that's something that could easily be included. An interesting thought.
And the next comment is from Wayne Yancey. He says he agrees with your section includes methodology. However, the potential exists to repeat these statements in the article system description.
Yes. And one of the things that I would like to say is that we do try to, if we're identifying a product in the section includes, certainly we try to also have a similar article title or at least a paragraph heading in Part 2 so that we get these things lined up identically. Louis Metcalf wanted me to mention that one of the ways that he tries to accomplish something similar is by using system description, which occurs early in Part 1 of the specification, to try to accomplish some of the same things. And I think he was telling me that he uses this way if he has, for instance, multiple roofing assemblies, that he would use system descriptions to just identify the parts and pieces of each of those systems and where they may be used, but rather than putting the information into section includes. So there are a couple of ways that you may be able to tackle this. This is just my idea as to one way that could be done.
And the next question from Gregory Reidenbach. For projects where materials are used in more than one area of the building, doesn't this process become onerous and open to errors and omissions? For example, if the CMU is not only being used as backup for masonry veneer, but also as retaining wall material and parking garage partitions.
I don't think it does become onerous. And I would go back, I'll take a step back to 1940 and architectural specifications, and one of the concepts that was presented then is that if we can specify the least first, so that we're picking up the most minimally used product or system, specify that first, and then finish with everything else, meaning using the concept of the residuary legatee, so that if it's not one of the very specific things, it's in that class of everything else is something. Using that idea, we cover the scope entirely, because even if you don't name a very specific item, you've grouped everything else into the in other locations or for other applications, so that you've captured the scope, and hopefully the contractor has included the scope. So then if there is any discrepancy, it's only a matter of, is it something that might be less expensive or more expensive? It's just that you already have the scope. Now it's just a matter of defining quality. So in the case of, we'll go back to this brick veneer, perhaps it's used in the exterior cavity walls, perhaps it's used for a fireplace surround on the interior, and we start to look at how and how much of the brick is used and where it's used, or the retaining wall that he gave as an example. We can start citing the smaller applications first, and then everything else last. Rob?
Yep. We have another here. Let's see, from Matt Short. He's saying this topic is one that touches on the issue of quality control. Specifying intent is the essence of quality for a specifier. I believe one of the benefits of an independent specifier writing the specifications is the inherent quality control role the specifier provides throughout reviewing the drawings, coordinating with the design team, discussing design intent, etc. Would you care to comment on your own experiences?
Okay, sure. I agree that specifiers often are the last quality control step. I mean, we're essentially reviewing all of the drawings and having that communication with the design team to try to understand what their intent really is. So we are, as we're doing the specifications, we're finding things on the drawings, and I will say from our own experience, we find some major faux pas that are able to be caught before the drawings go out the door, avoiding a lot of embarrassment, and avoiding a lot of, or I won't say a lot, at least avoiding some RFIs and some potential change orders. I think the discussion is good, because I think that that's where the QA process really happens. You see something that doesn't look quite right, you ask the question, you get an answer, but that may prompt more questions as opposed to actually answering the question. So it's a continuing dialogue through the process, and I agree, it's a great final QA step.
And one last comment here by Rob Miles. He's saying, I think that describing function should remain the purpose of design basis type documents like design criteria, conceptual design, or documents verifying code compliance, and should not, pardon me, and should not be a part of the specifications. The contractor does not need to know why, but what. Interesting, hey?
Yeah, that I don't know, because I I hadn't considered function. I understand the comment that was just made, and I believe that may be, it may very well be true. I would really need to think about that one a little bit more to formulate an opinion. But I understand both sides of that, and perhaps in some cases understanding why may improve the understanding of what the overall requirement is.
Mm-hmm.
That one's interesting. Anything else, Rob?
And that's about all for right now.
Okay. Maybe you could take a quick show of hands. We have 10 minutes left in the hour. I can share the survey results that we did with the group. It's going to be a really quick tour of the survey results if we do that, or we can hold that for a future meeting. So
actually,
let's,
why don't we hold that, because I do see at least one hand raised here.
Okay.
From 10 more, so maybe we should address that first here. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Ken, if you want to speak up. You should be unmuted now.
Hello, Ken? No? Okay.
All right. And
well,
actually, Thomas Smith has his hand up as well here.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and unmute you again here, Tom.
Dave, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I can, Tommy.
You may want a thought that I just had that you may kind of close out with a little bit is the impact of this doctrine, because this is a real tricky subject, and I agree with you that the intent of the architect should be clear, but how to make it clear without crossing the line, there's a real fine line there that we cannot cross, or we shouldn't cross, but yet how to make the intent known so they do know what we're talking about. So this is a very interesting topic, but the Spearing doctrine has an impact on this as well.
Okay. Do you want to explain what you mean by the Spearing doctrine and how you think it applies?
Well, I think the Spearing doctrine basically goes back to the indicated results concept, is that basically what's on the drawings is what the contractor is responsible to provide, nothing more, nothing less. And if you,
yes.
And I think what you're doing, I mean, one of the things I'm sitting here thinking about, on one firm I worked with one time, we did keynotes, and when we used keynotes and they were coordinated back with the specifications, it worked real well in that it actually showed on the drawings where the particular materials were being used. And so I think, I never did really think about it, but that communicated intent very well without actually telling the contractor what our intent was per se, but the intent became very clear because of the way that because of the coordination between the keynotes and the drawings and the specifications. Right. So that, I think that the keynotes there really provided the vehicle to tie these two things together with the specs. And I have also, back to Lewis, I've also used the system description and those to communicate, especially on roofs and of that nature, kind of to communicate certain requirements that make the intent clear.
Right, and I just went back to one piece I had in the presentation, and I think what you're saying, Tommy, is right, that we can't hold the contractor to perform something that is not required by the documents, and the requirements have to be absolutely clear so that if we are trying to specify the intent, we have to state that intent as a requirement. Some of the things that I find myself cringing at when I see the specifications is when a statement might end with unless otherwise indicated, or because it leaves everything so wide open that the contractor can't possibly search through all the documents to find any possible exception to that particular statement. You know, it's just not possible. And it leaves the architect open, I think, to some criticism if we can't tell them exactly what it is that we're expecting the contractor to provide. So, and it's also part of what's driving my opinion here as to how we need to approach this.
And okay. I think very much that I think that a lot of this is very important, but it's also important to, I mean, this is a very tricky topic, I would say that, and it's one that we should be constantly thinking about. Unfortunately, I think the day of the guide specifications, and I think this points out to the need for a specifier, because if the specifier understands the intent, then the specifier can more aptly specify the intent through requirements, and everyone comes out. But the problem is that you've got a generation now of people who are not really familiar, that's familiar really with specification principles, and I see that that this intent's being lost by the use of guide specifications, etc. And that's, you know, without really tailoring the specification to a particular project.
Right. I would agree with you there, Tommy. I absolutely do. And I think that that is some of the difficulty that we're up against, because it's easy to take the guide spec and simply edit without edit by deletion, rather than actually editing the text and turning it into something that's very specific to a particular project.
Yeah, I like one of Lewis's,
go ahead.
I like one of Lewis's statements that he said that he doesn't specify something that he doesn't understand. And that's one that has really stuck with me, that I've learned from Lewis, in that, you know, if you don't know what you're specifying, find out what you're trying to specify, or don't specify it. And a lot of times people are editing spec sections that they're leaving stuff in and not taking it out or whatever, and it creates ambiguities and misreading of what the intent of the documents really are.
Right, because what I'm proposing with the presentation today is something that's going to take more effort, and I think I started out saying that it's going to make you stop and think about what you're specifying before you specify it, because if I would just ask all of you that are listening, if you are specifiers, sit down with one of your sections and just try to make one of these very short statements. I think you'll find that it's not quite so simple as it may seem, because you need to capture the essence, and that's where the key is. So that if you can capture the essence and boil it down to that half a dozen words, I think then we have really accomplished something. Okay, Rob, anything else?
Yes, we actually had a comment previously from Leah Roscoe, and my apologies for not reading this sooner when we were on the section includes portion. But she states, if you say where in the section includes, this is actually the second place of stating what's in the drawings. So doesn't that conflict with say it once in the right place?
I don't believe that it does. And Lee, this is my opinion. So I'd love to hear more from you as to what you think the difficulty is, because I'm not trying to state the very, very specific locations. I'm trying to generally paint this mental picture so somebody can understand. And I don't believe that that really presents a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
I'm up for rebuttal.
All right, and the next comment here is, and I apologize again if I mispronounce your name here, it's Kimtuya Kirkpatrick, and let's see, a clear intent and performance results specified are great areas. These will help the commissioning agent, even though it requires the commissioning agent does not always receive the owner's project requirements and basis of design.
Yes, I think I agree with that, because I would put the commissioning agent potentially in the same position as, say, the design construction administrator. They're not necessarily involved in the design all the way through. There may be some that come in very late in the game, or even during construction phase. So it could be a great help to them. I agree.
And let's see the next. This is from John Schlageter again. Unless otherwise noted, should save time by focusing upon / noting only the exceptions versus constantly restating the quote-unquote normal condition.
Yes. The least shall be first, and then everything else. Yeah, so if we can state the exceptions, but I personally prefer them not to be stated as exceptions, but to be stated in a positive form. And because I think if we get into the exception mode, that it tends to be, it could result in some errors. It could result in some omissions. I think if we take a more positive, call it a proactive kind of an approach to state what's required, I think we're in a better position. And if we have one more, Rob, because we're right up against the hour.
Yep, we definitely are. And Sheldon put in an interesting comment here. He says, unless otherwise noted, is sorely abused. It's used so often it makes it look like the designer doesn't know what's in the documents.
Ouch. I could agree with that. There are some specifications I've reviewed that would be absolutely true. Okay, so I think with that, boy, I really invite all of your continued comments. This has been a great discussion today, and I really appreciate the input. I'll be writing notes of this, and Josh will be sending out the announcement when the notes are available. And I would invite you to continue the conversation. I know I'll post the notes on our own blog site, and you're welcome to add your own comments there. Share them with everybody else on the practice group and with the rest of the world. I think it's a good topic. I'm excited about the amount of attention that you've given it today. And Josh, I don't have my calendar. Josh, I didn't. I'm sorry, Rob. If you could, if you could tell me the date, if you have a calendar for our next meeting, it'd be great.
Yep, looks like July the 7th.
July 7th. Okay, so first Thursday of July, July 7th. Look forward to having you all back, and we'll put the results on the calendar for that month, and we'll go over those with you then. And maybe in the meantime, we'll come up with the next topic. If anybody has some suggestions, I would love to hear them. You could send them to me, or you could send them to Rob. That time I got it right. I'm going to get out of that habit. I don't know what happened today. I'm sorry.
No problem. No problem.
So with that, I guess we'll sign off, and we'll see you next month. Thanks very much for joining us.
Yep. Thank you all for attending the June meeting, and you may now disconnect.